Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Hi, Rob Browne here with you on this Monday morning. Got storms rolling in. Got back late last night from Clarksville. And there's so much going on in the world of college football. We're going to get started by talking about what was brilliantly put into writing by a good, smart friend of ours, of our show, about the U.S. women's soccer team going down in defeat to Sweden. Man, that Swedish soccer team looks a lot like the Swedish ski team. A lot of beautiful, beautiful ladies. Great team. I love America, but I'll sum it up best. It's not really the whole team, but just a handful of the American women's soccer team members that turn off folks. Goes to show you what a few can do to hurt the sport when allowed. But, you know, that's the kind of crap that's being pushed in America today. And they're finding out it doesn't work. I watched the track and field athletes Friday and Saturday at the Ed Murphy Classic in Memphis, and Eddie was right. I saw athletes from 41 countries, including the United States, people that are wrapped in the red, white, and blue of the American flag. And Eddie's right. They're working 2 and 3 jobs just for the privilege to represent their country. And they are so proud to do it, and I'm proud of them. You know what? You try acting like little brats in other countries, you may go to prison. They may cut your head off. I don't know what's going to happen. It's a free country. But you know what? Respect is a two-way thing. If you want respect, you got to give respect. And we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. And I'd like all these little spoiled brats to walk through the cemetery at Arlington or any other cemetery and read the names on those tombstones of Americans who have died to keep this country free. And you got some members of our soccer team that are so disrespectful to this country that unfortunately there are a lot of people out there kind of laughing that they got beat. Not against America, but for those individuals who are little spoiled brats. They're going to learn a tough lesson, okay? You live in America. Put your country first. Hi, Mitch Davis is with us. Buddy Martin, I think, is going to check in here in just a second, Mitch. This is going to be fun. Man, I mean, the Twitter sphere, the social media world is it is alive and well. There's so much happening. So we got Mitch Davis, the MitchDavisShow.com, Buddy Martin Show, and GatorBreakMedia.com. Chris Lee, the Southeastern 14 up in Nashville, covers the Nashville sports scene. Titans, Vandy, Predators, you name it. Hour number 2, Franz Beard, GatorBreakMedia.com. All daily thoughts, final pithy thoughts. Man, it's going to be fun hearing from him. Wess Moore, ESPN 103.7 The Buzz over in Little Rock. Y'all know the deal. We're here 6 days a week, at least 25 times a month. Do the math. That's 50 hours a month of content. And I can't find my reading glasses because this computer's right in my face. I'm wearing these ones of Mildred's. Holy cow, man. Don't think I've gone to the other side, but these things are terrible. Mitch, is that you? I mean, holy cow. I feel like I've been drinking mushroom tea this morning out in the dang field. God, Mitch, how are you?
I'm good. You're looking like Harry Potter with those glasses. Brown hair with brown Harry Potter glasses. So that's what you're looking like, Rob.
These are Audrey's. They're terrible. I'm telling you, I can't see. I can't see. It's like a kaleidoscope, Mitch.
Rob, I'm doing well. Got back from Starkville Saturday night. Went and watched Mississippi State practice football, so that was fun. And you were talking about soccer, and I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you the last time or even the first time that I watched a soccer game, soccer match. You know, my wife and I, we started Ted Lasso. So I'm guessing that counts as soccer, but I'm just not a soccer fan. I try to stick to football, basketball, baseball, and women's basketball as well, college basketball, because we have such a great 2 programs here in the state of Mississippi with both women's basketball at Ole Miss and Mississippi State. So a lot of exciting things. And, boy, I learned a lot about that Mississippi State football team on Saturday.
Well, you know, it's good. Everybody's getting to go out and see some practice right now at this time of year. And, you know, look, again, the limited window during regular seasons, about 15 or 20 minutes of stretching and all. With the anger, a lot of fans, I mean, if you're a fan on the West Coast of a Pac-12 school, other than the ones that are there, and you're mad too, you're going, how am I going to see my team play? You know, it makes you mad. But, you know, again, I like soccer's a fun sport to play. But when you've got a group of little whiny BMWs bitching, moaning, and whining, they ruin it for everybody. And you know what? Maybe this will wake some people up to quit taking this country for granted. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Don't ever forget that. Mitch, Mississippi State and Ole Miss, everybody getting underway. Let's talk about Mississippi State. How different was it being out there? No Mike Leach. I hate that because he meant so much to not just football, but to everybody that ever talked to him. Rarely could you go up and ask a football coach questions and get those kinds of answers.
Yeah, you know, it was a lot different this year because, you know, I wish I told Connor O'Gara this on the Mitch Davis Show podcast on Friday. I wish we had Mike Leach this year because the government said the aliens are real. I wish I could have spent a couple more seconds talking about aliens and extraterrestrials with Coach Mike Leach. But as far as difference goes, obviously the offense is going to be very different this year. They're going to be very tight end oriented. They got a transfer from TCU, Raylan Good, who is supposed to be really good at tight end. They ran a lot of sets with the tight end. And the backup quarterback, Mike White, is a very solid, good backup quarterback. Obviously, Will Rogers doesn't have a whole lot of competition because he is incumbent. He is the guy that Mississippi State has entrusted with that offense for the last 3 years, you know, under Mike Leach and now under Coach Arnett. Other than that, defense is physical. They're big. Whoever picked Mississippi State 7th in the SEC West polls, they were idiots because this Mississippi State team is a lot better than people realize. And it takes you to go out there and watch them play. Now, they might not show it early on. They might not show it against LSU or Alabama. But this team heading down the stretch, and you look at their October schedule, you look at the November schedule, it's very favorable for Mississippi State. And I think this is a team that can win 8-9 games again and get back to maybe an Outback Bowl or a Capital One Bowl or something of that nature. But a lot of excitement around the program. They're talking about culture, talking about the cultural change there under Coach Arnett. And Coach Arnett, you know, Robin, you heard him at Media Days. He's a guy that he's going to want you to bring your lunch pail to work. He's going to be a blue collar. They're practicing a little bit over at the farm at Mississippi State. And, you know, a lot of exciting things are happening in Starkville right now.
Well, Zach Arnett, 3 years with Mike Leach, understands that air raid offense. But he's not going to run in the new offensive coordinator for Mississippi State the same exact offense. Only Mike Leach could do that. That was what was so unique about it. But every year it had new parts to it because the shelf life of an offense is about 3 years in the SEC because the athletes are so good and the defensive coordinators catch up to you quickly.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about this offense? They're no longer going to be running the air raid. And you know, one thing that I talked to Will Rogers about, a couple of the other players about on Saturday, they said we're going to bring out tight ends, and you're not going to know if we're going to run it, and you're not going to know if we're going to pass it. What they're doing is putting tight ends in the backfield instead of lining them up on the line of scrimmage. They're putting them in the backfield, especially Raylan Gourd from TCU, the transfer from TCU. As far as just Will Rogers goes, I don't know if you saw him at Media Days, Rob, but
I did.
He's bulked up a bunch. I mean, he has really gotten big. You know, we had an opportunity to talk with him, and he was just talking about that senior leadership. I mean, Mississippi State has so many seniors on this roster, and they want to come out here and leave their mark on the future of Mississippi State football. And they're tired of people telling them that, oh, you're Mississippi State, you're not going to be much, you're not going to do anything. They're really taking this pick 7th in the SEC West personally there in Starkville. Well,
and that, look, I don't believe in putting ceilings on people. Neither does Buddy. And Buddy wanted to jump in here with us this morning, Mitch, and talk, you know, about also the big news over the weekend. It's sickening about, you know, Oregon and Washington joining Southern Cal and UCLA. Now you've got the Big 20. And what does this mean to college football going forward? Because I'm like you. Starkville, Oxford, yeah, they're not New York or they're not Austin. They're not a big city, but they're college towns.
They're
And
better
it means a lot to those people. And so, buddy, jump in here with us. Mitch Davis, the MitchDavisShow.com, one of our young 24, 25-year-old up-and-coming writers. And I've always told him to listen when Buddy's on and try to learn everything you can from Buddy and Franz, because Buddy, every time you come on here, it just, I learn more. I love it. Thank you.
I'm sorry for the misguidance you gave you there, Mitch, but I know Mitch. I've been on the show. Good to see you again, Mitch. Good to see you, Rob.
Yep.
I guess we'll jump right in. I've said this forever, that this has got to change. You know, I've been an advocate of the expanded playoff for 25 years. I love the game of college football. It's taking a beating right now. But I've said all along that ultimately the free market will settle it, and it will come out on the other side, because on the first day of football season for us here in Florida, it's the 31st of August in Utah, all that NIL stuff and all that expansion stuff and all the other things that went into a transfer portal are out the door. It's gone. It's about playing football, which I can't wait for. But having said that, as a proponent of expansion, as a proponent of super conferences to make the game better, I didn't see this one coming. And this is starting to concern me, because we have, let's be honest, Dion was right, we've sold out to the almighty dollar. That's what it is. Now, that's fine for the guys who run the game and the presidents and the ADs and all that stuff and what have you. It's not so fine for the student athlete. And I've come full circle on that. I used to say, well, you know what, they can make this work. They play a lot of baseball games, etc. Now, look, the SEC is going to be okay, although I think maybe Commissioner Sankey needs to look at that whole expansion thing again, although I know some people are against it in the league. I think it's time to reevaluate and think, well, the Big Ten's got 20. We could go 20. We have 4 teams right there in the ACC that could be picked off, and you've got a conference that's self-contained by geography. There's a concept that you actually have a geographical boundary, so to speak, of what we got, as opposed to playing a Rutgers, Oregon softball game at 4:00 in the morning, which is coming. And then the wear and tear on the athletes is going to be a concern. I saw and read and actually picked up the quote of Eli Drinkwitz. You won't hear me quoting Eli too often. He's not my favorite philosopher, but he talked about that. He said, nobody better ask me about the Big Ten expansion. And then he went on for 3 minutes about it. And he basically said, who's thinking about the wear and tear in the bodies of these 19, 20-year-old elite athletes who got to travel across country? I mean, somebody has lost their place. And I suggested in my column in Gatorade, they need to reset the GPS and figure out what they're doing here. The SEC has a chance to lead the way here, because let's be honest, it's the home and home series that are going to matter, that you can actually put on your schedule and count on. And then you build up rivalries. People say, oh, no, don't tell me you're in favor of Florida State joining the SEC. Yes, I am. I'm in favor of Florida State, probably Clemson, maybe North Carolina, and then pick Miami or Virginia, whatever, 4 more teams, because think of the self-containment involved in that. It's all in the same geographical footprint. It makes sense. Nobody in their right mind is ever going to watch football from the West Coast at 10:30 at night on Saturday after watching it all day. No wonder their ratings are never going to be that good. Now they got a new challenge, but in my mind, they got to go back to the drawing board and say, what is our purpose here? And I kind of hate this term, the way it's been misused and exploited, student athlete, but now it's time to embrace student athlete. I saw a tweet somebody sent out, talked about 4 kids who were on teams that left the Pac-12 and play spring sports, and saying, that's it for me. I can't do this. My family can't afford to travel and see me play anymore. I'm gone. So now this becomes proximity. There's a word, remember, proximity matters in conference play. Now, I got a plan for that down the road somewhere. I won't bore you today, but proximity matters and can become actually a recruiting tool. If you think, you're going to have a footprint that's only in the Southeast, it's pushing the boundaries in Columbia, Missouri, and out in College Station, but still in the footprint. And my kid's going to go to school, and I got a chance to not just see him play on TV, but be a part of it because I could travel anywhere with under 1,000 miles and make it to my kid's game. So there's something, I won't go along, Rob, with the piece that you sent me from Wall Street Journal that college football is broke. It's broken. I don't buy that. But I think there's some serious decisions that need to be made and need to be made soon. And I wrote this column on Sun just yesterday about why Greg Sankey needs to bring in Clemson and FSU to the SEC.
Mitch, you heard what he said. You're a great writer. Come back.
Yeah, so I think those are some really good points. And, we see this now with a lot of these companies, that are quote unquote going woke. You see the Pac-12 with the COVID, what they did with COVID, taking opportunities away from student athletes. I mean, it was, the SEC, the Sun Belt, the American, they said, hey, look, hell or high water, we're going to play during COVID. And so ever since that decision was made by the Pac-12, I feel like their grave had already been dug. I feel like the Pac-12 was dying. Of course, obviously USC, UCLA kind of started that. But then after they did that, I felt like that grave had been dug for the Pac-12. And, back to geography, the SEC, if we go add Clemson and Florida State, I'm going to be pretty doggone happy because I've seen Kentucky, back in my younger day when I got to be a fan a little bit more. I got to see Kentucky play Florida State and Clemson in back-to-back Music City Bowls with my dad. And those were some of the greatest fan bases that I had ever been around. They were super nice people. They fit the SEC mold. Miami, whatever. But I North Carolina, Virginia, coming from a Kentucky background with basketball. Yeah. I think North Carolina would be fun. I really do. You go back to the rivalry between Kentucky and North Carolina, Tennessee and North Carolina, Tennessee and Virginia. Those four programs right there, they already have those natural born rivalries. We see Tennessee and Virginia, they're kicking off the season here in less than 30 days here in Nashville, Tennessee. And that's going to be a fun game because it's such a regional rivalry because a lot of Tennessee fans, there's a large alumni base of Virginia fans in Knoxville. I think it'd be a great fit for the SEC. And, I've been a big fan of Clemson and Florida State ever since we added that team in Columbia, Missouri that I really just can't even fathom they're in the Southeast.
It's tough. It's a tough one. You just swallow. And you're right about Miami, that being a marginal team. First of all, that would give Florida 3 SEC teams in the state, which is crowding it a bit. Secondly, Miami fans are not very good fans. They don't grow. They've never drawn great crowds there, except when they're winning national championships under Jimmy Johnson. And I'm not a fan of their program, but I'm just saying, take your choice. Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Miami, etc. But I definitely have 1, 2, 3, Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina. Would add a lot to the SEC, not just in football either, by the way. So I'm in favor. I've come full circle. Remember, Mitch and Rob, you might know this. It would have been heresy to do this 20 years ago, to say let FSU come in the SEC, because they snubbed the SEC. They were invited, and Bobby Bowden said it probably wisely. No, we can find an easier path in the ACC, and he did that, and it worked for him. Times are different now. We've got to start thinking differently. We got to start thinking about proximity. It's like real estate: location, location, location.
Yeah. Well, go back 100 years ago, 1923. We had 23 members in the Southern Conference. In 1933, we broke off. 13 formed the SEC. 1953, the ACC was formed. Yet the Southern Conference is still there, from Virginia down to Texas and everywhere in between, and like the Sun Belt is what they really are. But we've been there before with conference expansion and realignment, but not geographically like this from the West Coast. What in the world is going to happen for the non-revenue sports, basically? That's what y'all are both talking about.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
That's the nightmare.
I saw Rick Pitino, by the way, said, you know what, maybe football should break off. And that might be the way to do it. Football should break off and then let these other spring sports and other basketball sort of play in their own league, quote unquote. And there definitely needs to be a change there because you can't take the Rutgers lacrosse team across country to play UCLA. It just can't happen.
And, when we see this with college baseball, and I know, buddy, you're around college baseball a lot down there in Florida, and I've gotten to cover Mississippi State and Ole Miss a bunch. But what we see in college baseball is the Big Ten already doesn't have any teams reaching Omaha. I mean, when's the last time a Big Ten school reached Omaha? And now you're going to add in this whole extra flavor of Oregon and USC. They're going to have to travel cross country, be a lot of wear and tear on the pitchers, a lot of wear and tear on the catchers. So in the secondary sports, I don't see how this is a great move. And even for basketball, when you're playing 2-3 games a week, basketball, they normally in the SEC, we play on Tuesday and on Saturday. So by the time you go back to your campus from Columbus, Ohio, all the way back to Eugene, Oregon, you're looking at probably getting there early Wednesday morning, late Wednesday afternoon, turn around again on Thursday or Friday, and travel back cross country to play at Rutgers or, I don't even know who's in the Big Ten.
Yeah, spending more time on the airplane, Mitch, than they are in class.
Yeah. I mean,
they're
having, and nobody remembers that Maryland is a part of the Big Ten. I'm almost certain, which is weird. Maryland to me is an ACC school, but they're going to have to travel across all the way to go to Maryland to play it. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if I was a Big Ten baseball player or Pac-12 baseball player, I'd be concerned now because the ultimate goal is to get to Omaha. And we see it year in and year out. The SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, they dominate Omaha. SEC gets 4 or 5 programs there. The Big 12 only gets 2. And then you've got 1 or 2 ACC schools, and that's the field in Omaha.
I know you got to go, Rob, and take a break, but I want to get
No, we're good. Keep going. We're going through.
I got about 8 minutes here to go, and I got to go take care of some business. But thanks for having me on today. Sorry I couldn't make Saturday.
Always, buddy. You know that.
I just want to throw out a couple of radical ideas. I'm not saying this is the answer, but you got to start thinking this way, okay?
Yeah.
What if they had? Well, first of all, I like Patino's idea. Let football go on its own. Just like Notre Dame plays in the Big East, right? Let them go on their own. And then the other sports Mitch is talking about, including basketball. Yeah, go back to the old model of the quadrant system, southeast, southwest, et cetera, even 5 if you have to. And now talk about playing a playoff by region, okay? By region, like they did in the old days, where the teams in the southeast, which include, by the way, a division of the ACC and division of the SEC. They could play among themselves, qualify, and play a tournament. That's one idea. Secondly, this is really radical. You could, and this is not the best idea, but if travel gets to be too big of a problem, maybe start playing games somewhere in Indianapolis where you have 4 teams show up, and play the neutral site, whatever. Just an idea that would cut down the travel, probably draw well, be a big TV draw, etc. There's a lot of creative thinkers, and Greg Sankey is one of them, and they can come up with something. But clearly, college football is crossing the line. We never knew we'd deal with this debacle where the carcasses of teams played in the Pac-12, et cetera, are strewn along the highway of college football, and we've abandoned people. And now we're asking the athletes to carry us and the athletes to do a lot more and the athletes to be a professional and spend more time on the airplane than the classroom. If it's not broken, it's getting close.
Well, here's the thing. John Steinbeck wrote that great novel, The Grapes of Wrath, during the Great Dust Bowl, the 1930s, the mass exodus of people from the Midwest to California. It's now the reverse, 13.5% state income tax. I mean, every time the Grizzlies go out there and they play the Lakers, they have to pay a 13.5% income tax. That basically, a lot of people think America is what some people want this country to be going forward. It's not. It's where dreams go to die. Not just Tiger Stadium is where dreams go to die, Les Miles. It's California, and it's now coming back. Guys, I think they're escaping Oregon, California, Washington, and everything because only 14% of the people out there claim to be really big college fans in most of those markets. Look at a place like Birmingham, 87% claim to be college football fans. The other 13%, I don't think they got the survey. That's what we're going to see happen. And it is not, as one listener just said, I like this. It's not up to the rest of the country to subsidize those lazy welfare slobs on the West Coast who put themselves in this situation. George Kliavkoff, Larry Scott, they're disaster. Those guys, I mean, they're like the guy whose resume said, my grandfather was the captain of the Titanic. His father was the captain of the Hindenburg. I mean, these people are disaster. They're idiots. And now Buddy Martin and Mitch, Buddy, they're getting what they asked for when they shut down college football during the virus lockdowns, those draconian lockdowns. This is what's coming. They remind me very much of the U.S. women's soccer team and a couple of little bad apples on that team running down this great country, and look what happens. And not a lot of people are too upset.
Well, you got that, and not to get too political with it.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that college football is an entity into itself.
Yeah.
When a virus takes over someplace, it doesn't care where you're from. It's a virus and everybody's infected by it. You can't close your eyes and say, screw the Pac-12. They made a bunch of some stuff. It's college football.
Yeah.
It's an entity. Yes, there are divisions, there are conferences, and the SEC is healthy, but don't get too fat, dumb, and happy because it doesn't take long to change things.
No.
You've got to start thinking now, what are you going to be doing in 3 or 4 years? What's going to happen to the game? What's going to happen to What's going to happen to the athletes? And Greg Sankey is a forward-thinking guy.
Yeah.
But just now, I wrote this yesterday, we're at the end of this season, 2024, we'll have seen more change in 4 years than the previous 100. It is so volatile, and we got to keep up. And again, I don't want to be an alarmist, but I'm really concerned of the direction of how things are going right now. And you start talking about being betrayed by the concept of student athlete, they call them, and they're not really, they're professional athletes. So I just wrote in my column, is anybody going to do anything? And I'm just waiting to find out.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm just saying, certainly you want to be safe. Nobody wants people getting sick, but I'm talking when you try to shut down everything. It was the worst thing we could have ever done. But the Pac-12's problem is they didn't look out into the future. I mean, Mitch, you can't help but agree with that. And they had no plan. They panicked, and panic is not a way to win.
Well, final thought, I'll let you go. Mitch, comment. I have a good friend in Denver named Joe Williams. We did talk radio for 20 years out there together. And we used to do the show regularly here together. Joe's an iconoclast. He tells it like it is and then some. And he is a big fan of Colorado football. Always has been. Covered him, knew him. They all knew him. And he called the Pac-12 about 8-9 years ago on my show, the Sissy Conference. That's what he called it, the Sissy Conference, And so I called him yesterday. He's off the air now, not doing it. I said, what's your take now on the Sissy Conference? And he stopped and said, what do you mean? Well, you know what I mean? You called it the Sissy Conference. It has imploded. Look what's happened. I said, yeah, it's a pretty sad day. So it's a pretty sad day all the way around, even for those of us who are on high ground and safe. The fact is that when the virus comes, it doesn't infect just a couple of people. It infects us all. I'm concerned about, and you can look it up in your scriptures, Rob, you got it, the lust for money, okay? It's not money, it's the lust for money. But as Deion Sanders said so accurately when asked about it, everybody's got to get their bag. It's all about the money. Unfortunately, Deion's right.
Yeah. I mean, he is. We love college football, and maybe we are going to see football break off on its own and these other, because the non-revenue sports, basically everything other than football, except in a few places, are going to suffer. And it's not fair to them. I mean, if you're a swimmer, if you're a golfer, I mean, a volleyball, again, I keep saying it, the Wednesday night game, Washington plays Maryland or Rutgers. Good God. And in your families, I mean, how are they going to see you play? The driving 3 or 4 hours and going and visiting with the fans and getting to know them over the years, we've got that in the SEC. We've been smart. We've always kept that geographical footprint, but they're not thinking like that out west. They waited until the house was on fire to apply for fire insurance. And now look what they got.
Listen, I kind of stepped on Mitch's segment here. I want to back out and let him make a final comment. I'm going to go. Mitch, I'm sorry if I interrupted.
Oh, you're good. Hey, I learned a lot from you. I love you, buddy.
Buddy, that's like Elvis showing up saying, you mind if I sing a song or two? We're like, hell yes. Buddy, we love having you on here. Trust me. Don't ever worry about it. And when you do that, that's like, you watch on news when the senior anchor comes in there, you're like going, come on, man, we're ready. We love it. So thank you.
There are some benefits of being old, Mitch. Just remember that. Guys, I got to run. Have a good one. Good to see you, Mitch. And Rob, will talk again. I won't be able to be on Saturday, but we'll talk again soon.
All right, we will. Thank you so much, Buddy Martin.
See you, Mitch.
Check him out, man. Buddy Martin Show. You got to love it. And I'm going to tell y'all something. There's just a lot of stuff happening, Mitch, and it's happening real fast all over the place. And you, Mitch, if you can stay on with us, because we got Chris Lee coming up from the Southeastern 14 up in Nashville, who covers the SEC, Vanderbilt, Predators, Titans, anything up there in the mid-state. I was up there in the mid-state, north of the mid-state, Saturday and Sunday at the mother-in-law's there to go get Audrey and bring her back because she rode up with Mallory and the granddaughter. So I was up there and I was listening to sports radio, 102.5, 104.5, all these different shows. And it was the Sunday stuff. So it was all mainly pro stuff, but even the national people were talking some college football. But Mitch Davis, this is Chris Lee. This is Mitch Davis, the MitchDavisShow.com. And as you can tell, we've been talking about conference realignment. He was down at Mississippi State practice Saturday. So say your thoughts on this conference realignment, Chris, what you think about it. And then let's talk some college football because, again, that's the Pac-12. But we're wondering, is Greg Sankey now going to say, well, fire up the engines, gentlemen, we got to go get some more people? I don't know.
Well, first of all, I hate it. I don't think that it's good for the game, what's happening. It might be good for the schools. I understand the survival instinct. I even understand now if the SEC needed to add teams because of survival instinct. But I'm going to do a video on it as soon as we're done on our channel with some further thoughts on that. But I hate it for a million things. I don't think everything needs to revolve around the 30 biggest football brands or whatever the list is. I don't think that's fair to everything and everybody else. What will the SEC do next? God only knows. I mean, 3 weeks ago, was the narrative not that Colorado is a non-entity and adds nothing to anything? And then Colorado moves conferences and it sets off this avalanche. So God help you if you're trying to predict what comes next, because I don't know either.
Yeah. And I'll say this. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I've always said, I don't want to see just a bunch of the top brands. And people say, well, that the free market, let the free market work out. But what makes college is what makes college special. And all that. We got to be very careful. And I get tired. I don't like it when people will say, to hell with these brands that aren't doing that well. Well, they're good in other sports. Yeah. So maybe we are going to see football go to its own thing. But let's do this. Mitch, if you can stay with us, I want you to comment on that. Chris Lee, Mitch Davis, Rob Browne. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back on this Monday edition of Sidelines on the first day of school here in the Memphis area. But kids are really excited about that. We'll be right back.
Kitchens and bathrooms make a home, and the design teams at Kitchens Unlimited know how to make kitchens and baths. They know it all because they have seen it all. Kitchens Unlimited has been designing and remodeling the Mid-South's kitchens and baths for over 50 years. Check out their showroom at 3550 Summer Avenue or visit them on the web at kitchensunlimited.net.
If you have a crash, dent or ding, go to GE, Patterson, and BBG for Tom Martin's Body Shop.
Come on down to Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, located on Historical Square in Collierville, Tennessee. Hewlett & Dunn is the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast, stocked with Southern brands you know and trust. And a new inventory arriving all the time. Do yourself or someone you know and love a favor and visit this store. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
As an agricultural producer, no matter where you farm, minimum tillage is a primary concern each and every season. At House Industries in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, we manufacture equipment to help you maximize efficiency when planting and watering a crop. Pieces like the pulverizer, bedder roller, 3-bar do-all, and bed conditioner assist you in optimizing seedbed preparation and ultimately your bottom line. Visit HouseIndustriesInc.com to locate the dealer nearest you.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you. And interesting stuff. Mitch, jump in here. Chris made some great points. I agree with Chris. I hate it for college football, but it's the other sports that Eli Drinkowitz, Buddy Martin so eloquently talked about, and you as well. But I want to hear your thoughts. You've got about 5 minutes, I know, before you got to go.
Chris, it's good to see you. I know I haven't seen you since the SEC tournament in Nashville, but plan on reaching out, talking a little Vanderbilt football with you and SEC football, you and Blake, and always good to talk with you, be in your presence. But
Likewise.
Rob, as far as all this goes, what's funny is you talk about regionality to this and geography to this. And I've recently moved down to Mississippi, and my wife is a diehard Mississippi State fan. Her whole family went to Mississippi State. We've got neighbors that just put up an Ole Miss flag up in their carport. They had to outdo us. They got an American flag, and now they got the Ole Miss flag. Well, my wife called me right before I got on and said, "Hey, babe, we need to order a Mississippi State flag." I'm thinking, okay, well, why? She goes, "Well, our Ole Miss neighbors have put up a gigantic Ole Miss flag, and I'm sitting out here looking out the window, and they have indeed put up an Ole Miss flag." So that geography, the regionality of this is what we're going to be missing in this expansion. And, the rivalries. I mean, down here in the South, Chris, Rob, I've got friends that I've met in Hoover, that I've met at the SEC men's basketball tournament, that are LSU fans, that are Florida fans, that when they come travel up here to Mississippi State or Ole Miss, that we'll get together and tailgate and have a good time. And, we'll have them in our home for a meal on that Friday night. And that's what you're going to miss in the new Big Ten with Oregon and Ohio State. You're not going to have those commonalities that you do with people in the SEC and even Missouri. As much as we want to give them crap for being a northern school and all that, there are still good people there that we have friendships with, that I have made acquaintance with. And I know that, Blake Lovell, who Chris works with at 14 Southeastern, has really kind of reached out to Dennis Gates and that Missouri basketball program, and really has paid dividends, because those people are really good people and they're really good additions to the Southeastern Conference. I think that's what we're going to miss in college athletics as we go expanding, is those regional rivalries that we hold so dear and true. The Pac-12 was dying, but it's still a sad day to see it go.
Chris, he's right. It's that we know, living in Memphis, my goodness, on the trading floor for years at work. But you've got, obviously you've got Memphis, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Vandy, Arkansas, Auburn, Alabama, LSU, South Carolina, Georgia. It's crazy, but we have so much fun with it because we all know each other. And I remarried. My wife is evolved for life. I picked up Mallory. She's an Alabama grad. And my 3 kids from my first marriage are all Auburn people, but that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to stand up and say, what about the student athletes? Nobody cares about them in this case.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts here. I guess this is the main one I've got, is personality is what makes the world go round, right? If everybody was just like me, would I want to hang out with that person? No, I wouldn't, because what would I learn? Yeah. And I think the same applies to college sports rivalries. I remember growing up, and what did you do on, what was it, I guess Friday or whatever, after Thanksgiving? You watch Nebraska, Oklahoma. Even if you were not a fan of those teams, you watch Nebraska, Oklahoma. And you can rattle that game off in so many ways. And look, some of those are going to survive because obviously if there's there's football 1,000 years from now, my guess is Auburn and Alabama will still be playing football, but and playing each other and still hating each other. So there's some of that that's not going to go away, but there's a lot of it that will. And I think that we are slowly sucking all the personality out of sports in that regard, and we're making it like the NFL. And well, guess what? If you want to go toe to toe with the NFL, which are people going to watch? We know the answer to that. And I'm not saying college sports is dying. I just don't see, and I'm going to talk about this in the thing I'll do shortly on our channel and expand a little bit, but I just don't see, sometimes the sum of all the individual decisions are not the best for the collective. And that sounds like a sort of a socialist statement, and I'm not that, but I think we can still agree that it's true. I just don't like so many things about where this is going. And I mean, we could do a whole hour just on the effects of the other sports outside of football too.
Yeah, Mitch, great stuff. Tell people real quick how they can follow you, and we'll be having you back on here again real soon, but love your insight.
Absolutely. Chris, I'm going to be in touch with you, maybe later this week. I've got to switch the focus from college football to the now FedEx St. Jude Invitational starting. I'm going to be in Memphis starting on Wednesday morning, so going to be covering that for the 5th straight year, so looking forward to that. Check out the website, guys, the MitchDavisShow.com. Follow me on Twitter or X or whatever the heck we're calling it. Mitch Davis _8. I'm still going to call it Twitter until Elon Musk tweets me himself and tells me that it's X. So follow me on Twitter, Mitch Davis _8. Going to have a lot of stuff at the golf tournament this week, and always good to go back home and see the family and see some friends back home in Memphis. And looking forward to going back and then coming back here and really focusing on college football down here in the SIP and looking at JUCO football, Mississippi State and Ole Miss, and should be a really fun season of college football here in Mississippi.
Oh, it will be. Mitch, thanks so much, man. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Mitch Davis, MitchDavisShow.com. Check out that podcast. It's great stuff. Chris, that what you talked about, these rivalries, here we are right now in the SEC. I don't know if we're going to expand or not, but I got a good take from one of our viewers right now listening down in South Georgia. Says, FSU, them in the SEC, said FSU is like the hot girl at Valwood who goes to Valdosta or Lowndes and thought she was a 10 and figures out she's really an 8. They got a great tradition, and Auburn played them. Auburn leads that series 13-5-1. They hadn't played, but they played in the national championship game in that heartbreaking loss to Florida State. But that was a great rivalry. But when they turned down the SEC in 92, they turned down and they turned off a lot of people. But I don't think their fans, Chris, have ever embraced being in the ACC. Not that it's not a good conference. It's just they're more in the footprint and the mold of the SEC fans.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to start the whole thing over from geography and what makes sense and where everybody's bread is buttered, FSU has never felt like an ACC school. No, look, FSU has had some nice runs in basketball here and there, but football is where the bread is buttered, and in baseball too, for that matter. And the SEC is very passionate in both. Obviously, it's a hot weather recruiting footprint that is similar to the SECs. They're right in the middle of it. I mean, the ACC, when we grew up, we thought of the ACC as a basketball league that sometimes played some good football. And the SEC was thought of as a football league that probably played better basketball than it got credit for at the time. And if you want to go based on those things, then yes, it's obviously been a better fit for the SEC than the ACC. But since when does fit determine anything anymore?
Yeah. Well, the Florida State alumni, they didn't start playing football till 1948, right after World War II. So they got about half as much time as the SEC schools do. Now, that does matter, but still, in the time that they've been playing, they're one of the most tradition-rich programs around. They've got 3 national championships. And the ACC, though, when they joined, I think they really thought there was more money to be made because of the basketball in that league.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the case. And here we are now, and I say this a lot, but if you bring in Florida State and Clemson to the SEC, given the fact you've already got South Carolina and you've already got the University of Florida, are you essentially bringing sand to the beach?
Dana O'Neill wrote a good piece about this in Athletic. I read it on Friday. I'm sure I've forgotten half of her points, but I think a lot of it was, what is the point of this anymore? I mean, what do Washington and Oregon bring to the Big Ten that it didn't already have? This rearranging of the pieces and sticking them places just because we have to. Now, look, the Pac-12, I can sort of defend Oregon and Washington doing what both schools did, because look at the money and look at, what happens if you stick around and the league implodes. Do you want to end up in the Mountain West? Probably not. So, I mean, again, I get the motivation from that side, but you just look at the mess it's creating.
Well, I agree with you. And you think about the parents of the student athletes. I mean, nobody's talked about this, but getting to see your kids play,
Yeah.
My mom says, you'll fail at a lot of things in life. You got to keep fighting. But to fail as a parent is the worst failure of all, because you're in complete control. Well, for all those parents who've worked so hard with their kids, and look, I don't care what we say, nobody sees more games than the moms.
No.
All right. My friend Fran Cunningham famously said one time when our boys were in like 7th grade at a baseball game at St. Louis Catholic School in Memphis, he said, Browne, a woman is on the way to see she's seen no less, with 6 boys, okay, no less than 2,000 baseball games in person. Think she doesn't know a little about baseball? I mean, but we're forgetting that. I mean, Buddy Martin was just on. He said on the show a couple of weeks ago on our Saturday roundtable, Chris, we're all working for ESPN. They're just so big now.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I mean, and I saw a podcast with Pat McAfee recently about him coming over more full-time. And the guy said, watch out, because ESPN, when they get hold of you, they'll try to change you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you something. Your honor is dearer than your life. You cannot sacrifice, and I'm with you, Chris. My faith in God is the most important thing I have. I could be broke, but I have that. And I know people who've traveled to third world countries and said, these people don't have 2 nickels to rub together, but they've got their Christian faith. They're the happiest people in the world. We are selling out. Look, I know money, and everybody is so sarcastic now. Oh, it's all about the money. It's just a business. Well, it is. But at the end of the day, there are people involved, and we got to find a medium to where, are we all working for ESPN? Buddy Martin asked that question. Your thoughts?
Well, that reminds me, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book a few years back. I've read 4 or 5 that he's written. I get them mixed up, but it talked about people doing things for free that they will do for free and not complain. Once you introduce a single dollar into things, it becomes a thing about money. And then people will get, I mean, look, when we were kids, the money that people make in the NFL now is incomprehensible compared to what I remember when A-Rod signed the contract with the Rangers. You just thought there's no way. And now that's, look what Ohtani's about to sign this off-coming season. The money keeps getting bigger, and somehow people keep getting unhappier. You've introduced NIL. I don't know if that's made anybody happy. I'm not against capitalism. I'm not against people earning what they can, but the introduction of the money dynamic, back to where I was going, just makes things so different. And look, college football and everything always had to exist this way, right? You always had to use college football to underwrite women's gymnastics or fill in the blank with whatever. And I think that's a good thing, right? I had a niece that played college basketball at Colorado State for a couple years, walked on, got to see her hit a 3-pointer at Thompson Bowling Arena. We'll never forget that. She won either. I think there were some good things that came with it, but now they were unwinding it, and ESPN is the boss of everything. We're already seeing I don't know if they're unintended consequences. I think people knew exactly what they were doing, but we're seeing consequences that aren't necessarily great for college sports at large and the people that play and invest the time in them. And that's the sad part.
Well, I heard it was at lunch yesterday with my brother-in-law, 26 years in the Marine Corps. And he said, I never got anything free from the government that I didn't pay for later.
Yeah.
Great quote. And I think where we are looking right now is, ESPN is big, and they just did another cut, got rid of a lot of really talented, really good people. But they're also not standing up for anything except
no.
And where were they standing up for women's sports? I mean, we had Riley Gaines on the show a couple of months ago. She was outstanding. She's a 22-year-old young lady that she's already married, and God love her, because she's basically been a lone voice in the wilderness. And now Sage Steele has come out. Yeah. Didn't she just recently get let go from ESPN? Samantha Ponder, Maria Navratilova. I mean, more and more. But where are more of the high-profile athletes? Do they want to see this continue? I mean, are we all basically just selling our souls? I mean, look, we got to make money. It makes the grass grow, but at some point, it's going to be like that old parable about the door-to-door salesman who was he wasn't really legit, and he's like a Bible salesman, and he's trying to sell Bibles, going door to door, and the guy says, "Son, what do you believe in?" He goes, "I'm just believing selling you this Bible." He goes, "But what do you really believe in?" He goes, "I've been believing in nothing all my life." I mean, there's either people that are legitimate or they're not. And I think where we're going in the Pac-12, what we're seeing is, forget about the regional rivalries. I like what the coach at Washington State said. He said, what about the 3 or 4 hour road trips? There's nothing like those road trips. And you know what? Vanderbilt now is improving at their facilities, but everybody wants to go to Nashville.
Sure.
And that's what we got to remember, at the end of the day, this is about having fun.
Yeah. It is. Again, I think that I think here's what I wonder, Rob. You have crashes every now and then. You have spectacular stock market crashes. You have the housing market collapse of 2008.
Yeah.
And we end up repeating the mistakes and expecting it to end differently, but that's another topic. But in any case, I do wonder, one day, are we going to wake up and one day to the next day, this worked and that worked and the money was there and this was sound, but it all comes to a screech. Well, I mean, I guess it is already, right? When you're seeing Oregon State, Washington State left out of things. But I think my next thing is, what unintended consequence are the people that are making these moves not thinking about that's around the corner? And I guess maybe that's the stuff that keeps you and I employed.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, but I think the free market always works. And I'm a financial advisor. I've been doing it 32 years. When the market's getting crushed, down 1,000 points, 1,500 points, people always say, "Rob, what were you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just managing my clients." But here's the thing. You don't fight the tape. That's one thing you hear about the stock market. Don't fight the tape. The market's a discount mechanism. It's usually 6 to 12 months in advance. Well, what we're seeing here in college athletics doesn't mean it's forever. Yeah. I mean, you may see a season or two of these cross-country road trips for all sports, not just football, come back, and there'd be mass protests of the student bodies going, "Hey, man, we can't even see our friends play because they're all over the country, and you're taking away the college experience of road trips and all." I mean, don't be surprised. Don't think that can't happen.
Yeah. Well, what you're seeing too is you're seeing a collision of market forces and non-market forces. And what I mean by that is the market is what's driving this, TV values are what's driving conferences, so on and so forth. But on the other hand, you have these colleges that are having to underwrite these athletic expenses and have for decades because of Title IX. And so that's something that they are sort of stuck with. that they've got to pay for it, even though it loses money year after year after year. And so then you've got to make your money in football to pay for stuff that you're forced to do. That's another dynamic too, in that it's not necessarily a free market either. You've got that component that's making it tougher on schools, and it's probably going to make it tougher on the schools that are remaining in what's left of the Pac-12 and similar situations too.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Pac-12, it's going to work out one way or another, but it doesn't mean that in 3 years they don't go back and say, you know what, we're getting the band back together. I mean, it's this stuff. That's what the free market. That's what I love about this country. The free market, the fans and all will eventually win out. And I wouldn't be surprised if ESPN, look, they're down from 100 to 72 million people that are hooked up to them, but there's 25 million plus on ESPN plus. So they're getting their information from somewhere. But at the end of the day, it's not as attractive to watch a game with a stadium with nobody there. The fans are what make these things look so fun.
Here's what I wonder. We're comparing past apples to what we think are future apples.
Yeah.
But at every point when we're eroding the things that made the apple in the first place, and I don't mean that's probably a bad analogy because Apple was at the center of this, and I don't mean the company. I mean the fruit as we traditionally used it.
Yeah.
But what I'm thinking is we're saying, okay, this model has worked based on this, and there's not enough money for this, so you got to go. But how much is the common fan that's sitting out there going to say, I've had enough? I'm sick of my school being outbid for players on the NIL market or whatever. And I'm if you're a Stanford fan, you wake up and your week on Monday is a lot different than it was a week ago yesterday. At what point do they alienate enough people that the dollars that they are using to shape what's driving the moves have now collapsed because people are just saying, I've had enough?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where we are. And then now we're at a tipping point, and we're going to see this year. I mean, the thought of Oregon not being in the same league as Oregon State. Are they still going to play the Civil War? I mean, you're taking, what about all those rivalries? So that's the crazy part about it. So far, in what you've seen, Vanderbilt practice, Clark Lee, Barton Simmons, he was brought in there to change how they recruit. Talk about what he's doing differently, because there are 3,300 kids a year that sign Division I scholarships. 1%, 33 of them are probably going to be consensus 5 stars. 350 to 400, 4 stars. The rest of them, 3s, 2s, and non-rateds or whatever. Most of the team that you have is built off of 3 and 4 stars, isn't it?
It is, and more 3 than 4. There's not many 4 stars on that roster right now, to be honest with you. But I mean,
I'm talking about just regular teams. Period.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Look, speaking of my situation that I cover at Vandy, that's what they're doing. They're having to money ball it in a sense. But you can see, I remember when I started covering them a couple of years ago. Well, I started covering them 20 years ago, but when I went to Clark Lee's into his first season, now look, I didn't think they were going to lose to East Tennessee State. You know, as bad as they've been, Vanderbilt's never been that bad. They've not lost one of those, which should have been a wake up call to everybody. I think it was. But I told people, I said, look, I look around and I say, how many players on this team would start for another SEC team? I mean, anybody, and you could maybe count a couple. You look around the roster, you don't see that anymore. You go, hey, not only do they have a guy that could start at linebacker somewhere else, but the guy behind him could beat him out. And it's been a slow march towards that. 2 years later, I think he's very much overhauled that team in terms of athleticism and competitiveness. No, look, is it good enough? No, they started so far behind that they still got strides to go. But now look up, instead of saying, well, hey, good luck naming a player on this team that'll play somewhere else. You can find a lot more than you could, and I think that's going to make it a lot more interesting. And look, you saw it start to shape at the end of last year when they beat Florida and Kentucky. I don't know that their record win-loss is going to be better this year. It's going to be harder to sneak up on teams, but certainly I think I'm watching a better football team than it was a year ago.
Yeah, and this is what, again, drives the sport is just that eternal hope, and what are they doing differently? But, you win at the end of the season, you beat Kentucky, you beat Florida. That is a positive, and that's a lot to go into the offseason with. And you get 6 games. It's a bowl game, but you get those extra 20 practices.
Yeah.
It all kind of just spirals from there. All right. Look, Chris, I know you got a full day ahead of you. Talk about how people can follow you and your show, and we'll get you back on here again very soon. Great take about where we are in college football. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we've got a YouTube channel, Southeastern 14, about to add some thoughts to what you and I just talked about. I've got some things that I think if they've been in place, you wonder if we'd ever been here. I'll share those on our YouTube channel in a few minutes. That's growing quickly. We'll be over 10,000 subscribers there within a couple of weeks. Southeastern 14 is where you find that on YouTube. If you're interested in Vanderbilt, I run the rival site, VandySports.com. I have for 20 years. We've got a podcast that's also on YouTube and where you find your podcasts. And again, that's Vandy Sports if you're looking for Vanderbilt specific coverage.
Yeah, look, I mean, we love it because you cover all the sports and all like that. So really appreciate it. The local people like you are so in touch with what is happening. It's not that the national people aren't good, but when I want to know about Vandy, getting you on here, man, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. We'll be talking again with him very soon. That is Chris Lee up there in Nashville. Let's do this. Let's take a quick commercial break. Before I do it, I want to say the first annual St. Paul Open to benefit the Peter J. Sarton Scholarship Fund will be held October 2nd, 8 a.m., Chickasaw Country Club in Memphis. Call Michael Jordan, 901-647-3014. That's 901-647-3014. They still have a few team openings they may have sold out. I'll find out for sure, but it's getting close. They have flag sponsor opportunities, whole sponsor opportunities. They still need money, participants, items donated in lieu of cash. That is the first annual St. Paul Open. And if you get out to Hewlett and Dunn, they're coming in every day by the truckload. New brands at Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. Pendleton, Schaefer Outdoors, Danner, Vask, Light Boots, Hire Boots. Hell, they Hire invented the cowboy boot. Okay, so that's pretty big deal. So now I'm gonna say this: Franz Beard is on with us. We're gonna be right back after this because he's got a lot to say about what's going on in the world of college athletics. It's a crazy world out there. But I think when you hear what Franz has to say, you'll feel a little more confident in the future. I certainly do. Be right back. All right, Rob Browne back here with Franz Beard on this Monday. Man, Franz, golly, my phone, just the information coming in, it's awesome. It's been nonstop. started really the end of last week and over the weekend and all. We've had a great one. And Buddy Martin's been on this morning, Mitch Davis, Chris Lee up in Nashville. And your take on the craziness that's happening with realignment. And then we'll get into talking some college football practice and life in the SEC. But you can't be an ostrich in this one, man, because we may see some more movement in the aisles in the SEC.
No, we will not see movement in the SEC, period. I can tell you that right now. It's not going to happen. The conference presidents, all 16 of them, are united in the fact they don't want any more teams than that. And Greg Sankey doesn't want any more teams than that. And why should he? If he brought in Notre Dame, that moves the TV needle. That adds value to the conference. If he were to add a package of Notre Dame and North Carolina, that would add value to the conference. FSU and Clemson don't add a thing, nor does Miami. They already got the state of Florida. They don't need any more. Yeah. And here's the thing to think about that nobody's talking about, but it's true. ESPN is not going to allow an ESPN conference. Okay, I'm weakening this ESPN conference to go to this ESPN conference where I bring absolutely zero value to this conference. FSU brings zero in the way of value to the SEC. None. Nor does Miami. None. North Carolina at least can bring you basketball. Yes, they can. But and they have a rich alumni base, and then all of a sudden you're in the Raleigh area. So, but the TV needle doesn't move with FSU. It doesn't move with Miami. Doesn't move with Clemson. It would provide a nice little rivalry because you got Georgia, 60, 70 miles away, something like that. So you got a nice little rivalry there, and you got Clemson, South Carolina, whatever like that. But you'd have FSU Auburn. Oh, okay, we're great, but guess what? It's not going to move the TV needle. And here's the other thing to think about. There's only so much money out there. All right. Take a look at what happened in the with the Pac-12, which didn't have to happen, but it did, because this is what happens when you put, brain dead people in positions of leadership, also known as the presidents of the Pac-12 and the conference commissioners. On that subject, Roy Kramer, 1990 to 2002, Mike Slive, 2002 to 2015, Greg Sankey, 2015 to present. What do those three guys have in common, Rob?
What do they all have in common?
Yeah. Smartest guy in the room, wherever they are.
Well, they were the tip of the spear in college athletics. That's what they were. I mean, and before that, Harvey Schiller, who made the divisional format a reality.
Well, but my point is this. These guys were the smartest guys in the room because they saw what they had right then, and they see what they need in the future. All of them, as forward-thinking guys as possible, and think far enough into the future that they say, okay, I've got from point X to point Y to figure out how to get there, okay? And see, this is where the problem has been with the Pac-12 and these other conferences. Now I give credit to Brett Yormark. Hey, Brett Yormark is now the second most powerful man in college sports, period. Because what he is able to do, he resurrected. I mean, we should call this the Big Lazarus Conference because he just raised the Big 12 from the dead. But
he did.
Here's what the SEC's got. You got 16 schools. You don't need any more. In the Big 10, they're having to dilute money to add in Oregon and Washington. People say, well, why didn't they add in California and Stanford? Because they got to get the other schools to agree to take part of their money, because Fox isn't throwing any more money into the pool, nor is NBC, nor is CBS. CBS quit the SEC because they didn't want to add any more money to the pool. So they've gone over to the Big Ten for not such a great. Yeah, I mean, it's not that great of a deal when you really think about it. But anyway, here's the thing: they're not going to add any more money, so they're getting in Oregon and Washington at $30 million each. Plus, they're adding $1 million a year to each one of them. So, okay, I've got a pool here, and let's say that I'm paying my 16 schools. Let's just say I'm paying each of them $60 million. That's $960 million. But now I need to add two other guys to it. So, all right, I divide 60. That's $60 million, and I'm adding two more, which is 60. So I got to dilute $5 million from each member. They're thinking, wait a second, you're taking my money, my $5 million. Now I'm not making as much money as the SEC. And then you start throwing in the idea of adding Stanford and Cal too, another cut deal. So I lose another $5 million a school. That's not going to cut it. This is why they've got such issues. And Greg Sankey and the conference presidents of the SEC aren't going to do that. Then you got one other factor. Okay, all these ACC schools that won out, okay, fine. You're going to be in court for the next 5 years because that's how long it's going to take it to settle. Minimum 5 years. So I can sign you on to, let's say, the SEC. Let's say Greg Sankey gets dropped on his head and he has one of these, moments, kind of like I have because I'm getting old, But let's just say that the SEC decides, out of the clear blue, well, let's just help our country cousins, okay? Yeah. In Clemson, there's a P in there. It's not CLEMSON, it's CLIMPSON, Clemson. If you've ever been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I agree.
But you say we're going to add Clemson and Florida State. Okay. Now I've got to go petition 16 schools in the SEC to dilute their money that they've already earmarked to add these schools into my league. Big problem. Second big problem. Now I've got to go to ESPN and say, hey, your ACC, which the ratings suck, we're going to make your ratings suck even more because we're going to take your 4 best teams just so we can have 20 teams like the Big Ten. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying, the whole time, Buddy is thinking differently when he was on earlier this morning about Clemson and Florida State maybe coming into the league. But my thought has always been what you said. We've already got the state of South Carolina. We've already got the state of Florida. That's like bringing sand to the beach. If there's movement in the aisles, maybe it's NC State and North Carolina and UVA and Notre Dame. Maybe that's what it is, because that would still keep the contiguous footprint of the SEC, all the states being connected. So it would be interesting, but that's what I think might happen. And, NC State, North Carolina, UVA, and Notre Dame. That's where I think it would go. But now, let's switch gears. ESPN, Disney. Disney is making a lot of money, yet ESPN is having to continue to make a lot of cuts and a lot of layoffs and getting rid of some of their best people and keeping some of the people that should have been fired, in my opinion. But ESPN, Buddy made a comment on the roundtable a couple of weeks ago, Franz. We're all working for ESPN. They're just so big. And then you look at CBS. The deal that they have with the SEC is $55 million a year. That deal was cut years ago. And that's as bad in terms of the money part as the ACC's indentured servant contract they have with ESPN through 2036. You know what I'm saying? I mean, And again, contracts are negotiated all the time. renegotiated. But for some reason, the ACC can't do anything about that contract, Franz. Just real quick, and then I want to get into some more a lot of college football. But the ACC right now, are they the next one to? Are we going to start seeing here now, or are they going to wait until after the season? I mean, I don't think they want to do anything, but do they feel like they have to do something?
No. And what can they do?
I agree with you.
Because here again, if they tried to expand, well, who wants to join their league? First and foremost, if they Memphis would. Of course, Memphis would crawl backwards to join anything but the AAC. South Florida would. But these schools don't add in. They don't add it. Again, it comes down to the same issue with the SEC has. What adds value to what you already have? And tell me, please, how does anybody add value? So now we come to the second issue here. Yeah. And that is, it's okay. Think of this like divorce court. Okay. And your Judge Judy's presiding over divorce court. Okay. Okay. Judge Judy. Okay. It's going to cost me $120 million in immediate exit money because she gets the motorhome and the house on the river and the fishing and your fishing lodge and all the other stuff. She gets all that $120 million, but alimony. Okay. This is the big catch. This is why nobody is going to go after an ACC school, because of this thing called grant of rights. Now, they had that with Texas and Oklahoma, and it's costing them $100 million each to get out. But guess what they've got? They got oil money. I mean, they just call up Big Bubba over there in Lubbock and say, Big Bubba, guess what? You're going to have to give us the productivity out of a couple of oil wells for a while, because we got to have your money to pay out of there. And Big Bubba said, well, what are they going to do? Do it, And the same thing with Oklahoma. You've been to Oklahoma, you know how many oil, you've seen all the oil wells. Wherever you go, there's a presence of oil there. They got the people to do it. They made the payment, and the contract was only good until 2025 anyway. So they got $200 million from two schools for 2 years worth of grant of rights money. Okay, that's a pretty good deal. We're talking 13 years now, however, here.
Yeah.
Now, do a little quick math, because I know you went to Auburn, and Auburn makes sure that you take freshman and sophomore mathematics, okay?
Ciphering.
Ciphering, yes. Naught from naught is this, and you carry the naught and you subtract the naught.
And gazendas. Gazinda, 10 goes into 20, 20 goes into 400.
Yes, indeed. You watch Jethro Bodine too. Granny with her big hog, her hippopotamus, which she was going to butcher it and sell the meat on. All right. You got 16 schools in the SEC, all of which are going to be making in excess of $80 million a year. Okay. And let me sidetrack a little bit. ESPN's laying off people, but ESPN is holding on to the properties that matter. They're ditching stuff that doesn't matter. They're not letting the SEC go anywhere, because the SEC is one of their bell cows. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to what I was saying here. Do the math. 80 million times 16, what do you get? You get $1.28 billion. Okay. That's what FSU would get if they came to the SEC. 12 years, because this year's shot, but 12 years of $80 million. Well, excuse me, that's 960 million. My millions and billions are mixed up. $960 million on top of the 120. So that's where I got the 1.2, whatever. And I'm screwed up. I went to Florida, man. Sociology.
Well, it's a lot of money though.
History. I can tell you about the Seminole Indian Wars all day long. Anyway, you look at this. By the way, Lake Okeechobee and Lake Jesup have the most alligators of any two lakes in America. There's a gem for you today. Anyway, you look at this. That's where the big issue is this grant of rights. Let's just say FSU or Clemson. Let's say they negotiate and say, okay, half. That's 480. Okay. 480 and 120. Now, even I can figure that out. $600 million. That's a lot of bake sales. That's a lot of car washes. That means that they're going to have to, the tractor, they're going to have to double up on people going on their tractorcade when they go to from Clemson to Athens for a ball game. Okay, everybody line up your tractors. Let's storm Athens.
Yeah.
The math tells you this is not going to happen. Now, the Pac-12 disintegrated because they didn't know what. They were too snooty. They were taking too many of these transgender gender identity courses to take basic math, and they never got the math straight. And, supposedly, you think about this, supposedly 12 of the smartest people in the entire planet, the university presidents of the Pac-12 elite academics.
Yes, Winthrop.
And they hired Larry Scott, and then they hired George Kliavkoff.
Boris Karloff, yes.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And look what they got. They have a league that no longer amounts to anything.
Yeah.
Because they didn't do the basic math. They never figured that out.
Yeah. Franz, you're on a roll, and you really are. And I'm going to add this part of it, and that is that the Pac-12 it's the reverse of the grapes of wrath. People are fleeing from California on the West Coast, and now the schools are, because you remember the Pac-12 with Larry Scott could not, and George Kliavkoff yet has not done it, get a deal with DirecTV for the Los Angeles TV market to carry the Pac-12 network. They never embraced it. And they've been watching and sitting around just waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's what the Pac-12 has done. And in the SEC, and the decorum, the setting prohibits me quoting verbatim what one of our listeners said, but he said, I agree with Franz Beard. Huck Finn, FSU, they had their chance and they chose the ACC back in 92. And I remember that. Look, I don't hate Florida State. I like Mike Norvell, but, I watched him build Memphis. It was great. But Florida State, they are cheap. They don't have the boosters and the money that you think they do. Now, that you would think that they did, but they don't. Florida does. Miami's big, cash cow for NIL. His company is let's just say this. It's 22 cents a share?
Less than that now.
Okay.
It was $10 a share 1 year ago, August, August.
Yeah, I would have to get you to sign a lot of paperwork to buy shares because it's under $2. It's a pink sheet. It's crap. But I'm gonna tell you something, Franz, and you're nailing it. You always do. I don't call you the Iron Duke for nothing. I want to see college sports good all over the country because everybody that plays sports, you get so much out of it.
Sure.
But you can't fix stupid. The elitist pinheads at the Pac-12 universities and other universities around the country, they don't know what they're doing. And in the SEC, we all know how it's done. The board of trustees basically run the universities. We remember Gordon Gee, who was the president that tried to attack Florida when they played Ohio State about playing. Was it Gordon Gee? Yeah. And okay. They've always looked down their noses, the Big Ten and the Pac-12, at the Southern schools.
Sure.
And you know what? Nobody in the South is moving up there. If it's so bad, why are they all moving down here or trying to? At least if you look around Nashville, they are. But we're having a mass exodus. Who can afford to live in a state like California? Again, the Grizzlies or anybody in the NBA or what NFL, when you play a game in the state of California, professional NFL, NBA, whatever, every game you get a paycheck. 13% state income tax in California. They clip you with that. Okay. Who wants to live there? They claim there's 38 million people there. I mean, it once was a wonderful place to live. Now it's not. Again, in the 1930s, John Steinbeck's great novel, The Grapes of Wrath, people poured out of the Midwest to California. California is the place you ought to be. Beverly Hillbillies. Okay. But now it's the opposite. It's a beautiful state. There's a lot of great things about it. But when you've got a psycho narcissist as the state governor, what do you expect? And it trickles down to college athletics, doesn't it, Franz? It makes you very uncomfortable.
Well, I don't want to get into my politics, but
I know that.
But
it's a mess.
I am a Republican, and I'm not disappointed or sad to say it. I have problems with the Republican Party too, but Democrats seem to think that think of what's happened to the Pac-12 is what the Democrats have done to the United States, which is the credit rating just got diluted, and everybody else is going to have to pay for it.
You just nailed it, Franz. That's what one of the several viewers have said. That guy's right. They're talking about Franz Beard. You are that guy, okay? Said he's nailing it. The Pac-12 crapped in their own bed, soiled their linens, and now the rest of American athletics has to pay for it.
Sure. And here's again, it didn't have to happen. Now, people say, well, somebody asked me this weekend, I was at the Florida football practice, and somebody said, this could happen to the SEC. And I said, no, it couldn't. And I'll tell you why. Because since Roy Kramer came along, the presidents of the SEC are smart enough to say, you do it. We're presidents of universities. We are not business people. And guess what? Guess what Mike Slive was? Guess what Greg Sankey is? Guess what Roy Kramer was?
Yeah.
They're business people. They understand that this is the entertainment business. This is not, we think of it as sports because we love it because there's sporting competition. Forget it. It's not sports we're talking about. We're talking about entertainment. Okay, we are going to entertain you, our alumni. If you'll come, and 90,000 of you will come to Auburn, Alabama, or to Gainesville, Florida, or 100,000 to Tuscaloosa. We will entertain you for 3 hours in exchange for you spending lots of money so that we can pay for Nick Saban's salary or pay for Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze got hired for $6.1 million. Okay. Who's paying for that? the money doesn't just grow on trees. That's coming from the fans. For what purpose? Entertainment. He's a sporting coach, but it's all about entertainment. And the SEC presidents have been smart enough to say to Roy Kramer, to Mike Slive, and to Greg Sankey, you tell us what we need to do, and we will do our best to accommodate you. Now, they had a little snag on the scheduling, but people don't realize what was the big snag. The big snag was you had people who had contracts that they were going to have to pay off. So they said, so we go one more year with an 8-game schedule. It will be 9 the next year. The biggest reason that it didn't go, it went from 8 to 9 already, is because people had contracts with Western Walla Walla State Junior College and Technical Institute. And they bring them in November for road, to be roadkill. So, okay, we'll kill that. We'll run over that possum, that armadillo, and leave them dead on the road. Dead on the road when they come here, or flatten them. And then we got to play the Iron Bowl next week. Ooh. Yeah. You don't want to get rid. They didn't want to get rid of these games, which they were going to have to do, which would cost them. Okay, I'm paying, I don't know who Alabama typically plays. They typically play somebody who is absolutely worthless the week before the Iron Bowl, but they pay them $1 million. That's $1 million. They said, wait a second, we don't want to give up this for 2 years worth or whatever. No, we're not going to. So we end up with a 9-game schedule in 2025. 2024, they'll have 8, but 2025, they'll have 9.
Franz, let me interrupt you real quick. We interrupt this program to bring you this important bulletin. You're saying in 2025, you're that confident the SEC will go to a 9-game conference schedule?
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
Absolutely. But they had games that they didn't want to pay off and everything like that. People got to rearrange schedules. Maybe you can get Western Walla Walla Technical Institute and Junior College to move that game because you only have X number of non-conference games. So maybe you get them to move them to 2028 or 2033, and you pay them part of the money up front to do it.
Yeah.
And stuff like that's going on. But this is the thing. But the conference presidents, just the same, they let Greg Sankey run the show. And he's the most powerful guy in college sports. That's why he's powerful, though, Rob. That's why Brett Yormark is powerful, because he runs that show in that conference. In the Conference Lazarus, which has been raised from the dead, he runs that show. This is why little Jimmy Phillips has no power. They're in the Always Country Cousins Conference.
Well, you're on a roll, okay? I'm going to tell you, I've been saying this with you as well. We both have, about the Big 12. I thought it was the second best conference in America probably last year in football. It was the best in basketball. But blindsided Bob Bowlesby. The fact that he recovered so quickly from getting sucker punched in the back of the head at a bar fight at 3 a.m. was nothing short of miraculous. And I got a lot of respect for that, man. I don't know him, but I damn sure like to have him on the show, because they could have had a pity party and sat there and just felt sorry for themselves. But they went out and they grabbed UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU. And we've been saying this on the show for a while, friends. And that is, we felt like that certainly Colorado would come back to the Big 12. We felt like Arizona State and Arizona would, and we felt like Utah would. And it's happened. Mm-hmm. There was a little bit of a dust up with people saying BYU being 42 miles away, Park City to Provo, where BYU is, that they didn't want Utah coming into the league. Well, that ain't their call. There's things bigger than them, but that's going to be a lot of fun. They're going to keep that rivalry because it's going to be a conference game. But the middle of America, like we predicted, everything fell in their lap. I mean, but they were smart. The Big 12 is, to me, you remember just a few years ago how much power and leverage the Pac-12 had? They were flirting with Texas and all those schools in Texas, and Governor Ann Richards was sober enough to go, well, you're not going to leave Texas without taking Baylor. They're going to, that. Remember that? Can you believe the Pac-12 had that kind of leverage and that kind of power?
Well,
and they don't. But you know what's amazing? Like we said Friday, I pointed this out, Franz, agree or disagree. But for years, we watched the 4:30 afternoon, 5:30 Eastern Rose Bowl. The Big Ten teams went out west and were basically like, it was like watching gladiators at the Roman Coliseum. The Pac-12 schools would just tear up the Big Ten. And now it's the Big Ten that is throwing out the lifeline to the Pac-12. And I wonder if in 2 or 3 years, the travel, the wear and tear may lead to mass uprising, student protest on campus, put the band back together. Remember, this is all temporary. And we've seen conference realignment before, Franz. We'll see it again. But I think that this one here is nuts. And having to, when you just think about what Eli Drinkowitz and other people are saying, football will be fine. It'll figure it out. That's a once a week deal.
You got it.
But it's the other sports. You got to think about baseball, swimming, gymnastics, golf, track and field, hockey,
basketball.
What
basketball is going to have to do in the Big 12, for example, is take the old Pac-12 model. The old Pac-12 model was you played, half the teams played Thursday, Saturday.
Yeah.
The other half played Friday, Sunday. And that's the way it's going to have to be. But then what they did was, for example, if you went up to California and let's say you play Cal on perhaps you play Cal on Friday and then you play Stanford on Sunday. And in the meantime, for example, Southern Cal was up and they played Oregon on Thursday and Oregon State on Saturday. And that's how it worked. And they're going to have to figure something out like that. Football, as you said, will be fine because it's one time a week. But think about this. That one time a week, it's going to take a week for the fans at Southern Cal, which I know they're going to flock to New Jersey to see the State University of New Jersey.
Rutgers.
Yes, indeed. As what I call Duke University is the University of New Jersey at Durham.
Yeah, it really is. Good point.
University of Miami is the State University of New York at Coral Gables.
Yeah. And okay, so Franz, you're right. And here's what really is going to be tough. How many kids on the West Coast now are going to say, I want to go to Southern Cal, UCLA, Washington, or Oregon, but I don't want to do all that traveling. I want my parents to be able to come see me at the games.
Mm-hmm.
Is this now an opportunity for the Mountain West Conference to go in there and say, hey, look, we're going to be what the Pac-12 was. We're going to keep Stanford, Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State, and we're going to bring in all these schools we've been wondering about and make our own conference, but at least we'll have regional rivalries and your families will be able to watch you play all of the sports, not just football, but all of the sports. I'm telling you right now, it's not what's happening and what everybody else is seeing. You better go Wayne Gretzky on this one. Don't go where the puck is. Go where you think the puck's going. But Franz, again, sounds like Crossfire with Morton Kondrecki. But am I right? Am I onto something that something big is going to happen? I don't want to see that fall apart out there.
The logistics of the Pac-12 now merging into the Big Ten are just going to drive people crazy. The reason they did not want to add Oregon, they did not want to add Washington. Washington and Oregon didn't want to go, but they went with the cantaloupe grape philosophy, which is we can stay in this league and we get 100% of a grape, or we go to the Big Ten and we get 8% of a cantaloupe. 8% of a cantaloupe is more than 100% of a grape.
Yeah.
And this is why they did it, and this is why they added them. But they added these schools for one basic reason. They don't need them because they're not going to move the television needle in the Big Ten at all. But what they're going to do is, okay, you have Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and Southern Cal. So you figure they're going to play. They're all going to play each other during the season and whatever. So you've got they've got to figure out one of these like 3 permanent opponents or whatever.
Yeah.
They're going to be each other's 3 permanent opponents. Trust me.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild one. Wes Moore, ESPN 103.7, The Buzz over in Little Rock, the capital city, is on with us right now. And Wes, we're talking about it. We're talking about the number one story in American sports, and that is we're talking about the Pro Bowlers Tour. And we want to go seriously. We're talking about all this crazy college expansion. Now, you grew up in Gainesville, Texas, north of Dallas. And Gainesville or Jacksonville?
Jacksonville. You got your Florida cities that also are in Texas confused.
That's right. Sorry. Now, do you remember growing up out there, Wes, when the Southwest Conference broke up, then the Big 12 was coming together? I mean, and remember just a few years ago when I was referencing Ann Richards, the then governor of Texas, stopped Texas and schools from flirting and maybe going to the Pac-12. Think about the leverage the Pac-12 had then, and now, I mean, they're just like just desperate, and they're willing to go across the country to get the money from the Big Ten because the Pac-12 has a financial model that's third world.
Yeah, it shows you how important leadership is, doesn't it? How the Pac-10, man, if they'd have got Texas, Oklahoma years ago, 2010, how that could have changed. Well, it would have saved the conference. It would have saved their TV ratings, that's all that really matters. How many people are watching? And let's face it, there's a lot of other things to do on the West Coast besides sit around and watch college football, and that's divided the attention of the fan base out there. And honestly, a lot of college football is just it's about the alumni. It's about the students that go there. That's where you get that pride. And a lot of those in the Pac-12, it's just they don't have that same allegiance to college football. Maybe they move off. I don't know what the case is and why it struggles, but definitely in the South, that's where the college football viewership is, and that's where you're seeing some big TV money being dispersed. So I go back to the leadership and what could have been for the Pac-12, and now you look at it and how far it's fallen in about 12, 13, 14 years.
Yeah. And think about this, Wes. Look how happy and excited Arkansas's fans are. For the longest time since 92, they've been on the Western Front, out there kind of by themselves, and now they've got Oklahoma and Texas. And they've only played Oklahoma 15 times in 130 plus years of college football. But, they've tried to make that Missouri rivalry a rivalry, but it just ain't happening. But the Oklahoma one will, anytime they play, that's 2 tradition-rich programs like the Texas one. The SEC's, the genius of every commissioner, as Franz pointed out, is we've got those regional rivalries. And Arkansas fans, they don't all live in Fayetteville. There are tons of them in Arkansas, obviously, but they're in Memphis. They're in cities all over the South. So whenever they play, it's a road trip for the fans in those other areas. But isn't what makes the SEC so special is we all go to each other's campuses. We know the campuses, the stadiums, and we know fans from all these other schools. That's what is special, and they're giving that up in this Pac-12 Big Ten merger.
Yeah, you got to take the good with the bad, and I understand what USC and UCLA did, and Oregon. You got to have money, and you can't compete with other schools that are soon to be getting $100 million plus in the Big Ten, the SEC, with the TV contracts, and you're getting 20. There's no way you can sustain that. So
Correct.
yeah, you're gonna have to give up. You're gonna have to give up some of these little, short road trips to Cal or Stanford. But in the long run, that's worth $80 million a year, and you still get to play USC and Oregon, so Washington. So they'll still get to travel a little bit, but no, let's don't confuse it. It's all about the money, and you got to have it, or you're gonna get left behind.
Yeah. Franz, I mean, you hear what Wes is saying, and it's a big difference. They could not work out the financing in the Pac-12, and George Kliavkoff came from Las Vegas. He was supposed to be the guy to save the Pac-12, and he did everything but save the Pac-12.
Well, the people who really are responsible are the people who are the presidents of those universities, because they're the ones that hired him. They did not. They hired somebody who, he's supposed to be the money guy, but they hired a guy that they thought they could control. And this is the difference between the SEC and why the SEC is so good. This is why the Big 12 suddenly is so good. The Big 12 hired Brett Yormark, and they said, "You're in charge. We don't know diddly squat about this business. We're academics. We can tell you about the sociological differences between genders, but we cannot tell you diddly squat about how to fill a football stadium."
Yeah.
And you go, the SEC's got Greg Sankey. The SEC presidents, to their credit, pretty much, I'd say 95% of what Greg Sankey gets is rubber stamped by them. They may put up a little opposition here and there, but it's rare. It takes, for lack of a better term, and I think Wes would agree with me, to head a conference like this, you better have a dictator in charge who says it's my way or the highway. But you get a guy of the Pac-12, they had Larry Scott and they had George Kliavkoff, and these are the guys, and the presidents thought they could control them, and they couldn't.
Yeah. Wes, you look at Arkansas. For the longest time, think about that. Frank Broyles, look what he did, the vision that he had for Arkansas. He got them out of the Big 12 or the Southwest Conference because he was told, I believe, that they weren't going to be invited to the Big 12. Well, didn't he have the last laugh on that one? And how grateful are people at Arkansas? And is there a statue of Frank Broyles out in front of Reynolds Razorback Stadium yet?
Yeah, Coach Broyles is an iconic legend here, and this conference realignment goes about, and more things happen, and teams get left behind. He becomes even more brilliant for having that kind of vision for Arkansas and to jump way ahead in '92 so that they wouldn't be left behind. I mean, it's speculation, but who knows? What if they'd have stayed in the Southwest Conference and you don't have the money for the facility upgrades, and does Arkansas get left behind, and where would they be right now? So it could be a lot worse. And to have a team in the middle of this, in the middle that's securely set in the middle and not having to worry about your conference or your future and being in the SEC, that's a good feeling.
Yeah. Wes, I got to ask you, I've got a copy here. I got it from my birthday from Michael Jordan. Hooters Arkansas football 2023 version, the Wild Wild West. I love this magazine. It's awesome. Now, I got to go over some nicknames with you. I cannot say it enough, having been a local TV reporter myself for a few years in Columbus, Georgia, for Channel 3, News 3 on your side, WRBL on 13th Street, Channel 3. I love it, man. The local, you are so lucky, Wes, and I know you are, but Franz, you ought to see him on TV, Fox Sports Channel 16 in Little Rock. Loves what he does. He is passionate about it. College, I mean, he's covering UCA, the Bears, over there in Conway, home of the Wampus Cats. But Wes, I got to tell you, I found my new favorite nickname in the state of Arkansas. It's the Ozark Hillbillies. I love. I spend a lot of time up in Hardy on the Spring River. I'm in Arkansas all the time over in Cross County. But let's talk some college football right now. Razorback recruiting, it's getting better. Pittman, he gets it. But let's talk about that right now, what you've seen so far, because you may be getting to go to some practices that in a few weeks you won't be able to get to. So let our listeners and viewers like Franz and me and the rest of the free world and the unfree world know about Razorback football.
Yeah, you talked about the recruiting. The 2024 class is coming together. They continue to just really do a good job in 2024. But the thing that I'm most impressed with after the first 3 days of fall camp is the recruiting they're doing in the portal. And it appears, and look, it's early, but the guys they got out of the portal, I think they've hit on again. And that's the receivers. That's the DBs, the secondary guys. That's the defensive line. There's one offensive lineman in the starting lineup. They have at the very worst increased their depth in case something happens. But guys, this is the deepest defense that I've seen for the University of Arkansas since I've been here in 2003. So we're going on 20 years. They've got 9 seniors on the defensive line, defensive tackle and defensive ends. They've all got experience. Some of them transfers coming in that played a lot of snaps at their schools and a lot of starts. Same at linebacker. They went in and got 2 starting linebackers, and they already have 2 linebackers from the University of Arkansas that they really like. Then they went out in the portal and got a safety and 2 cornerbacks, 2 safeties. And so the depth on this defense, in years past, you're like, okay, if they can avoid it, that was always one of our big questions that we would ask people. What position group are you most concerned about if an injury happens? Yeah. And there would be a debate. I don't know what the debate is right now because they are deep at really every single position. The biggest question mark is going to be wide receiver because they lost everything. But they once again hit the portal, brought in 3 wide receivers, and that's all anyone's talking about right now, those 3 wide receivers and how good they look. Coach Pittman said these were kids that were slow to develop in high school. They had to go to a smaller route, whether it's Division II or FCS. Their bodies caught up with them. They matured physically. And these guys are 6'7", 6'5", 6'5", big, fast wide receivers. And they've been tearing it up early on in camp. And once again, I'll say it's early, but there's a lot of optimism about the depth of this team and the transfers that they brought in and how good they've looked so far.
Franz, what he's saying, that coaching staff they've got up there has got a lot of roots and relationships in the Deep South. And that I'm looking at recruiting now. In Arkansas, you'll see a top 5. A lot of guys at Auburn, Alabama, and Georgia recruiting, you'll see Arkansas in that top 5. And they're going to get some of those guys. I think they're sitting at number 15 in the country, Franz, in recruiting. It's pretty cool to watch.
But tell me about the offensive line recruiting, how it's going on for the Arkansas Monticello Boll Weevils. That's the one I got to know. Or the Arkansas Tech Wonder Boys. I hear they got need in the secondary.
I do love those names. I mean, the Wonder Boys, you're right. Over Arkansas Tech in Russellville. That's in Russellville, isn't it?
Yeah, Arkansas Tech's in Russellville. Don't forget about the Southern Arkansas Mule Riders in Magnolia.
Yeah. Oh, heavens, yeah. I mean, lest we ever forget that. I mean,
I love it. I love all these teams. I mean, Wes, look, I know we're about out of time, and Franz Beard, man, awesome having you on here, GatorbaitMedia.com and the Buddy Martin Show, and Wes Moore beating the pavement, covering. You got a daily sports show on ESPN 103.7 The Buzz, and you're also sports anchor, which means you're working a Monday through Friday schedule, but you're also working a a lot of Saturdays and Sundays, mainly a lot of 18-hour Saturdays. So how can people follow you? Because, you know, coming in and wanting to hear about the Razorbacks, you're everywhere covering in the natural state. And we appreciate so much you taking time out of your morning to join us for all of our listeners and viewers everywhere. Thanks again.
You bet. Go to Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. It's Wess, 2 S's in Wess, _ more, 2 O's and more. Go download the Buzz app, 1037 The Buzz. And we got our own app, or you can just go online and get us on the website, 1037thebuzz.com. Coming up on the show today, we've got Tom Murphy from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. He's been at the first 3 practices. He will join us to give us a practice update and kind of tell us who's shining and who's been looking good so far for the Razorbacks. And we're going to talk with UAPB's new head football coach, Alonzo Hampton. It's year 1 for him. He's got a couple practices under his belt. He's going to join us to talk a little Golden Lions football later on in the show.
Well, we love it, man. Have a great show. Be careful out there. It sounds like it's raining is it raining over there in Little Rock? Because I'm actually in parking right now, so it sounds like it's heading our way. It is heading your way, and it's a nice cool front, and it's going to cool things down for the rest of the week. So instead of having a heat index of 115, it's going to be a heat index of like 95. So it's already a lot nicer. Well, let me look. It's 70 degrees right now outside. So there you go, a little sports and weather report. I love it. With Fox Sports Channel 16's Wes Moore. Thanks so much. Franz Beard, Wes Moore, everybody, thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Never miss an opportunity to help people who help you along the way. Give back, put back way more than you take. Have a great day, everybody. We're out of here. We'll see you tomorrow.